I'm telling you from 70 years of experience, don't listen to them.
Yeah. Listen to yourself.
Yeah.
He doesn't gossip. He doesn't joke. Denzel doesn't raise his voice. He lowers the room. And when he doesn't like someone, you feel it before you hear it.
It's a gift. It's an opportunity, and most importantly, it's a gift. Obviously, everybody here is talented enough to do that, but don't get it twisted.
For over 4 decades, Denzel Washington has stayed untouchable. No scandals, no flops, no public meltdowns, just control, discipline, precision. But behind all that calm, there's a code, a personal system for who he lets in and who he quietly shuts out. Because Denzel doesn't care about fame, he cares about focus. He doesn't respect noise, he respects craft. And if you violate that code, there's no second chance. Training Day, Malcolm X flight, Fences. The performances are legendary, but the silence between projects, that's where his real decisions live. He doesn't rant, he just doesn't return your calls, and once you've been cut out, you don't get written back in.
I always looked for that, for lack of a better word, angle. What's the story? That's the only thing I wrote on the...
He's worked with the best, but only a few earned his respect. The rest, they showed their true colors on set, in interviews, or just by trying too hard to be liked. And here are the 6 actors who crossed that line, who never got forgiven, never got invited back, and never even knew the moment they were cut off. Not officially blacklisted, just erased. Number 1. Chris Pratt. There are actors Denzel Washington respects instantly, and actors who burn that bridge before they even realize it's been built. When he signed on to The Magnificent Seven, Denzel didn't just agree to remake a Western. He agreed to share the screen with 6 other men who would carry that legacy alongside him. He's not a man who takes that lightly. He doesn't show up to trade laughs, win headlines, or chase chemistry. He shows up to tell the story. And from the very beginning, Chris Pratt was on a different page. Pratt brought what Hollywood loves: energy, charm, a smile that never drops. But that same looseness, that constant rhythm of jokes, improvisation, and self-aware charisma never found harmony with the tone Denzel was creating. To the public, they were castmates. On paper, they were partners. But behind the scenes, something never clicked. Or maybe it did, just not in the direction Pratt expected. Denzel has worked with comedians, he's worked with improvisers, he's worked with chaos, ego, even arrogance. But what he won't accept is someone treating the process like a performance. And that's how he seemed to view Pratt, not as undisciplined, but unserious. Not disrespectful, just misaligned. Denzel is an actor who lives inside the frame, not around it. And when he looked across the camera and saw someone bouncing energy instead of grounding it, he stepped back. One crew member said it best: Denzel doesn't need you to be intense, but he needs you to be still. On set, the relationship stayed professional. There were no blow-ups, no demands to recast. Denzel doesn't waste energy on public drama. He simply narrows his focus until the other person disappears from it. And after the film wrapped, that disappearance became visible. He didn't attend photo ops with Pratt unless required. He didn't mention him in interviews, didn't tag him in praise, and never once referred to him as a standout in the project. For a man like Denzel, who routinely shouts out co-stars and lifts younger talent, that kind of omission isn't a mistake. It's a verdict.
There's a saying, when the devil ignores you, then you know you're doing something wrong.
Even in post-release coverage, Denzel chose to speak about the film's themes, the director, the weight of legacy. But he never mentioned the team, never said Pratt's name. And here's the difference. Chris Pratt likely thought everything was fine, that the smiles on the carpet meant mutual respect. But for Denzel, silence is never neutral. It's a line. The truth is, Denzel doesn't hate loudly. He doesn't criticize in headlines or correct people on podcasts. He doesn't have to. Once he identifies an energy he doesn't trust, he simply leaves it behind. And Chris Pratt? He was left behind before the final cut even hit theaters. Number 2, Jared Leto. There's a kind of intensity Denzel Washington admires. Deep, focused, internal. Then there's the other kind. The kind that draws attention before the work even begins. That's where Jared Leto comes in. They never worked together on screen, but their paths have crossed. Press events, mutual collaborators, award circuits. And more than once, when Leto's name came up, Denzel didn't hide the chill. It wasn't personal. It was professional. Leto's methods, staying in character off camera, sending bizarre gifts to castmates, treating roles like performance art, don't impress Washington. They exhaust him. Denzel was trained in theater, Yale, stage discipline. He believes the character lives in the work, not in the hallway between takes. When someone turns a film set into a performance for the crew, or blurs the line between actor and spectacle, Denzel doesn't lean in. He shuts down. I've seen people hide behind a method. That's not commitment. That's ego in costume. That quote came years ago, long before Leto's more infamous on-set antics made headlines. But it stuck. It framed Denzel's view of certain actors, those who demand attention in the name of process, but forget that the real work is what ends up on screen. And when The Little Things was announced in 2021, some expected sparks. Denzel and Leto, two Oscar winners, opposite each other in a crime thriller. But as press rolled out, something was off. Denzel was unusually distant from the co-star dynamic. His interviews focused only on the director, the script, and Rami Malek. Leto's name barely surfaced.
I didn't no chit chat with Jared, but Rami and I would discuss things and talk.
On set, insiders described a strange rhythm. Leto reportedly stayed in character the entire time, never speaking to Denzel as himself. Denzel didn't protest. He didn't push back. He just stayed on his side of the craft, shot his scenes, hit his marks, then left. And once filming wrapped, the distance got wider. Denzel declined joint press junkets. During the official press tour, his responses about co-stars were diplomatic but brief. Meanwhile, Leto praised Denzel publicly, calling him a legend and a dream collaborator. Denzel returned no such favor. That silence wasn't accidental, and in Washington's world, silence speaks the loudest. He doesn't criticize openly, he doesn't tear down peers, he simply moves on. And when asked, years later, whether he enjoyed working with Leto, he gave a sharp nod and said, "It was interesting." That wasn't a compliment. It was the cleanest way to say, never again. Leto may live for transformation, but Denzel lives for truth. He doesn't want the madness, he wants control. And when another actor brings chaos, no matter how talented, they don't last long in his orbit. Number 3. Ethan Hawke. Denzel Washington doesn't confuse chemistry with compatibility. Just because a scene works doesn't mean the energy behind it was clean. In Training Day, the tension between Denzel and Ethan Hawke wasn't just scripted, it was real. And that's exactly what made the film work. But behind the scenes, the dynamic was far less heroic. There was no mentorship, no warmth, just two actors operating from opposite corners of the craft. Hawke was still rising then, young, raw, and hungry. He came in with indie credentials and theater roots, but his approach leaned heavily on naturalism and loose, actor-driven interpretation. He liked the edge, the discomfort, the freedom to fumble into something alive. Denzel, on the other hand, didn't fumble. He built, deliberately, intentionally, and watching Hawke explore a scene like a sandbox didn't sit right with him. Some people show up hoping something will happen. I show up knowing what I'm going to do. That one line, delivered years later in a roundtable, didn't mention names, but it described a style Denzel doesn't tolerate, one where preparation takes a backseat to vibe, and for all of Hawke's critical praise, Denzel never invited him back. They shared powerful scenes. They earned awards, but the moment the camera stopped, their connection ended too. While promoting Training Day, fans expected stories about brotherhood and creative bonding. Instead, interviews were stiff. Hawke was animated, eager to praise his co-star. Denzel nodded, smiled politely, then pivoted to the director, or the city, or the script.
That might have been the script. I didn't ad-lib that.
To be clear, Denzel never dismissed Hawke's talent. He simply refused to validate his process. There's a difference. Years later, when The Equalizer and Fences rolled around, projects with heavy moral weight and emotional depth, Hawke's name never came up. And when asked in a 2017 interview whether he'd ever work with Hawke again, Denzel replied with a flat, "We already did something good." That's Denzel's version of closure. There's a quiet standard Washington holds. It isn't about fame or box office numbers, it's about clarity, about intent. He doesn't need his co-star to agree with him, but he needs them to arrive prepared, listen more than talk, and trust the structure, not fight it. Hawke's loose edges didn't threaten Denzel. They annoyed him. The improvisation, the philosophical ramblings, the creative wandering, it all felt like noise. and Denzel doesn't work with noise. Even decades later, when Training Day was brought up in retrospectives, Denzel praised the writing, the tone, the atmosphere, rarely the other actor. He respects the film, not the collaboration. Ethan Hawke may have earned an Oscar nomination for his role, but he never earned Denzel's trust, and that, in Washington's world, means the door stayed shut. Number 4. Mark Wahlberg. Denzel Washington doesn't go looking for friction, but when it shows up, he doesn't pretend it isn't there. In 2013, he signed on to Two Guns, a buddy action film with Mark Wahlberg as the co-lead. On paper, it looked like a straightforward studio project. Guns, banter, big-name stars, box office gold. But behind the camera, things weren't quite that easy. Because Denzel approaches every film, even the light ones, with the same intensity he brings to Shakespeare. Wahlberg didn't. Their chemistry on screen worked. The script gave them fast dialogue and a shared spotlight, but when the cameras weren't rolling, that same rhythm fell flat. Wahlberg joked, riffed, played to the crew. Denzel didn't. He's always in gear, always moving. One assistant on set noted, Denzel doesn't move like that. He's locked in. Everything else just distracts him. Wahlberg's improv-heavy style grated against Denzel's precision. Wahlberg came from a background where instinct ruled the moment. Denzel came from rehearsal, table work, and structure. That difference played out quietly on set. No arguments, no big scenes. Just two men speaking different professional languages. And Denzel didn't need to correct it. He just removed himself. He kept their conversations short, stuck to his process, and left when the workday ended. Wahlberg, meanwhile, stayed social. That imbalance didn't cause chaos, but it did create something else. Detachment. The press tour made it even clearer. Wahlberg leaned into his usual charm. Loud jokes, off-script banter, one-liners aimed at the audience. Denzel smiled less, spoke less, sometimes didn't even look his co-star's way when he answered a question.
Complete professionals, I've been able to ask Denzel for a lot of advice, both personally and professionally.
For fans, it was easy to miss, but for those who know Denzel's patterns, it was telling. He compliments the people he respects. He lifts them up in the press, names them directly, often more than once. Wahlberg? He never got that treatment. Instead, Denzel steered every interview back to the director or the concept of the film, the team effort, never the partner. He was asked once, years later, about working with Wahlberg again. His answer was measured, it was fun, that was that. It wasn't anger, it wasn't shade, it was final. Because for Denzel, chemistry isn't enough. If the foundation isn't built on focus and mutual respect for the process, he moves on. Wahlberg was never unprofessional, but to Denzel, he brought a tone that made the work feel lightweight. And when the work feels light, Denzel lets it go. They haven't worked together since. No joint projects, no public reunions. Wahlberg still speaks highly of the experience. Denzel, as usual, says almost nothing, and says everything. Number 5. Tyrese Gibson. Denzel Washington almost never responds publicly to criticism, so when he chooses not to answer, the silence tends to echo. In 2014, Tyrese Gibson gave an interview that didn't make major headlines, but it made one thing very clear. He wanted to work with Denzel. Badly. He didn't hide it. He brought up Washington in multiple interviews, calling him the actor he admired most, someone he dreamed of collaborating with. But over time, the tone started to shift. When no invitation came, and no projects ever developed, Gibson's admiration turned into something else. He began calling out Denzel for what he described as gatekeeping, implying that Washington didn't do enough to mentor younger black actors, especially those outside the elite circles of Hollywood. Denzel never gave me a shot, Tyrese said. He keeps to himself, doesn't pass the torch. Denzel didn't respond. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't even address the remark indirectly. Instead, he did exactly what he always does when a line is crossed. He shut the door quietly and completely. At the time, there were 2 film projects floating around with both names loosely attached. One was a police procedural, another, a possible ensemble action film with a faith-based angle. Denzel reportedly pulled out of both before scripts moved forward. No announcement, no clarification, he just walked away.
We sent Denzel footage, sent over the script, and obviously he don't put his name on just anything.
This wasn't about personal offense. Denzel has dealt with louder critics in his career, but Tyrese made the mistake of assuming visibility equals access. He believed proximity, fame, box office numbers, genre overlap, earned him a seat at the table. But Denzel doesn't hand out seats. He watches behavior, he studies intention, and when someone accuses without understanding the weight of what they're saying, Denzel doesn't argue. He vanishes. Gibson has always worked with intensity, wearing emotion on his sleeve. He acts with volume. But for Denzel, that kind of transparency can read as instability. He values control, not just in performance, but in presence. Emotional outbursts, public grievances, passive-aggressive interviews, they don't register as honesty to him. They register as noise. Everyone's got passion, Denzel once said, but not everyone knows where to put it. Even years later, Tyrese continued to mention Denzel's name, sometimes positively, sometimes pointedly. But Denzel never returned the gesture, not once, not on red carpets, not on talk shows, not even in roundtable conversations about industry legacy. It's not a feud. There's no bad blood, just one man waiting for a door to open and another who already bricked it up and walked away. Because when Denzel sees emotional volatility dressed up as ambition, he doesn't correct it. He avoids it. And for Tyrese Gibson, the rejection was never announced. It just became permanent. Number 6. Russell Crowe. At first glance, Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe seemed like a perfect match. Two heavyweight actors, two intense presences, and in American Gangster, that energy exploded on screen. But off-screen, the connection never fully clicked. They'd worked together once before, Virtuosity back in the 90s. It was loud, messy science fiction. No tension, no fallout, but no friendship either, just a job. So when they reunited for American Gangster, the stakes were higher and the performances deeper, but creative tension followed them through production. Crowe is known for being hands-on, sometimes to a fault. He wants input, creative say, sometimes even editorial suggestions. Denzel doesn't operate that way. He believes in trust. Show up, do the work, respect the system. Crowe's behind-the-scenes intensity didn't offend him, but it did exhaust him. Everyone wants control. I want the story, Denzel once said in a press Q&A. During the press run, they sat side by side, spoke respectfully, but there was no warmth, no follow-up projects, no quotes about future collaborations. Crowe praised Denzel. Denzel focused on the director. Even in interviews reflecting on American Gangster, Denzel spoke about the era, the themes, the structure of the film, rarely the co-star. And from him, that absence says more than any critique ever could. Denzel doesn't hold grudges. He holds standards. And when someone crosses the line, he doesn't fight them. He forgets them. No headlines, no warnings, just silence where their name used to be. Because in his world, respect isn't requested. It's observed. If you want more stories Hollywood won't admit, like, subscribe, and if you really want in, become a member. Drop a comment with the one name you think deserved it most. We'll be watching. And remember, some actors stay off the list. The rest just don't know they're already on it.